So, Kathy Somerville, this is a real treat for us. This is our opportunity to see the person behind the professional with all three of them. But Kathy was born in Lubbock and raised in Hawaii. Talk about culture shock. She was groomed for a time such as this. Her middle-class upbringing in the 1950s prepared her for the wild, real-life lessons from her deals and heels years in sales, marketing, and leadership skill development. Life has been Kathy's greatest teacher, and she has learned invaluable lessons along the way. Kathy will, Kathy will captivate us with her stories of living, learning, and upgrading, what she calls thriving in the unexpected. As the GGBC's first woman president, Kathy knew it was time to rejoin and support this year's female president as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kathy.
Oh, wow. What a great introduction. Thank you, Carl. And what an honor to be amongst so many people who spend their time and their energy understanding the significance of effective communication. Truly, I mean, the communication is the beginning of the aspect of connectivity, right? And we're never going to grow if we don't understand that we're in it together. So I'm just so grateful. And it is for a time such as this that I return to the club. But I will let me go back and thank you for that great introduction, Carl. I was born in Texas, raised in Hawaii, lived in 7 different places before I reached the age of 12. And so I've always embraced change. I look to change. People ask me if I was a military brat. My parents did meet in San Antonio, Texas at Lackland Air Force Base. Lackland was a training base for the Air Force during the Korea, we're not allowed to call it a war, but the Korea interaction. They met, they fell in love, they had 3 daughters, and I was one of them. So, but the movement had to do with my dad being in the tire business. So I say all that because change has been my friend. I mean, I kind of broke down and cried my eyes out when I was 12 and I moved, but I learned that change wasn't bad, it was just awkward. And the awkwardness to it actually had some lessons that I could, if I chose to, make the most of it. Now, gosh, I hope my timer's on, ladies and gents, because I didn't set a timer. So if you could set my Academy Award nomination for 10 minutes, I'll shut up in time. But I do want to say that it the same time. So change became a form of maybe not dealing with things, right? So the idea that it was easier to change sometimes than it was to embrace what needed to be handled also became something I needed to manage. So maybe there were some times that I may have previously pivoted when I should have hung around a little longer. And that's what I learned through the level of not quitting and not dying. I think that's been the essence of my lifestyle. If you do the math, born in the 50s, you know that I have a few decades under me. And each one of those decades, I think, has brought me to a deeper understanding of what's important and what isn't. And I loved what it said about the persona, because I have learned to be a chameleon when necessary. Me in with my guns blazing be done. And so when I look at the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, when I was in my deals and heels years, early in my 20s, when I was 28 years old, I was fitting the way that I needed to laugh at jokes that weren't funny and be a part of things that didn't necessarily interest me for my career advancement. I was lucky enough to have some really great male mentors along the way that kept everything on the straight and narrow. And at the same time, I learned that there was a part of me that wanted to do more in business and just make sure that I checked everybody else's understanding of what needed to be done. But I learned how to be both and. I learned how to be both a significant individual as well as part of a team. And I think that was something that when I carried on into the 30s and the 40s, that I then took on the opportunity to buy my own restaurants, to do my own things. I was for me. However, it's not, it's quite often the tip of the iceberg rather than the bulk of the substance. So I learned how to be both quantitative and qualitative in the way that I delivered to my work. I read a book once by Robert Greenspan. And in that book, I realized that my work was going to be my vocation. I was lucky enough to have the kind of work where I could pour my heart and soul into, but I was also starting to become fortunate enough to enter into a relationship with a wonderful man who I then married and had 3 great children. So lo and behold, my life on a career level, but also take on the work of 40 years old entering into motherhood. And so I ended up having 3 children in the age of 4. 3 children under the age of 4 that were brought right into my package, and I loved it. I loved the life. I loved the excitement. At first, I was on the learn as you go routine, which I ended up realizing that's kind of the story of life. I'm happy to say that most of you met me when I was raising my family and doing the careers deals on heels. That was back in 2006 when I entered into the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. By 2010, I was the first lady president. So even without being too concerned, I was managing to integrate not only who I was, but what was expected of me. And I say that because that's a big theme of the pivot, being able to assess what's around me while at the same time taking consideration for what it is that I do well and want to do next. And if you Google me, you can Google me. I think I've done better talks, but this one was important for me. If anybody has done a TEDx talk, you know that the day before is one of the most meaningful days there is, because you have to go on in full dress and they film it. And for the idea of a YouTube clip, which is really where you live on into infinity, is they're able to splice it together if anything is off or if timing is off. Well, when I went on for the dress rehearsal, I get in front of the camera thing that I had learned, everything that I had practiced for. Anybody who's this particular speech I had memorized just completely it all. 7 of the worst minutes of my life. I ended up putting something together. I called it quits. I walked off the stage, and the coach who was there said, if you don't want to do it tomorrow, you don't have to. By that point in 2022, the decades had started coming behind me, and I knew that there was an exit door. And this is where I'm going to talk about the pivot. I knew that there was an exit door, but I also knew that there'd never be a chance like this for me again. So I went home, I cried, I called my coach. She told me, she goes, you've got this. It's your talk. You've gone farther than 95% of the people who even think about wanting to get up on that stage. I want you to go back out there, read your script one more time, listen to your recording, tear it up, and go speak from the heart. This is your talk. You've owned it. You've earned it. Get out there. I took to the stage the next morning, and I have to tell you, it was exhilarating, not because of the impact that I had on others, but because I was able to see the magic of what happens with me when I don't quit and I don't die. I learned to pivot. I learned to grow. It was funny to tell you that story has taught me more about human resilience and our ability to go above and beyond. Because if you remember, 2022 was also the end of COVID. We were just coming out of COVID. And as a result of that, I spent those COVID years getting into what it was that I would do. What would you do if you didn't care if you won or lost? And I started doing it. And so I'm going to end in this, and I'm so gracious and glad that I've spoke within my time. I've learned that why don't you be you and see what happens? Why don't you learn to embrace the whole dance, the parts where you trip and fall, as well as the times when you sing and dance, because of the thing that comes with it. So thank you. And it's an honor.
Thank you, Kathy. We very much appreciate it. And just to let you know, because you'll see it on the recording, there were some glitches and dropouts while you were speaking, and it didn't matter. We got it anyway. It was fine. So well done. Well done. That was some inspiring stuff there. So now we'll go on to our next speaker, Betty Rhodes. Betty, Betty's life has been a colorful journey from New York to Georgia, another culture shock. She's been in Spain, Tennessee, DC, and finally to San Francisco. She's always just one step ahead of the law, right? No. She has dedicated herself to serving others and having a great time along the way. A multiple cancer survivor, Betty has a knack for finding humor and light even in the darkest times. Professionally, she is a speaker, coach, consultant, and sommelier, fervently believing that mastering public speaking is key to maximizing our impact. Personally, Betty enjoys wine, amateur pole dancing, competitive karaoke, snuggling rescue animals, and being a fun auntie to 3 spirited kiddos. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our stage, Betty Rhodes.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Carl. I am actually joining you today from Napa Valley, California, at the One Hope Winery here in the Rutherford area of Napa. We're having our annual conference. I've ducked into an office. There may be people coming in and around me. We're gonna just deal with that as it comes. So, have you ever known one of those people who seem to have luck to spare? The people whose lives appear to unfold in the most fortunate fashion, for whom the circumstances always seem to move in their favor, who just seem to embody a sense of ease? That's not me. When I started to think about how to frame this introduction to all things Betty, I thought about maybe titling it A Series of Unfortunate Events, even though that's already taken, because I've had a lot of stumbles along the way. I've had literal and figurative stumbles. But the thing about struggle is that it builds resilience, just like Kathy just talked about. It gives you a sense of perspective, and it definitely gives you some really, really good stories. Like when I was 18 months old and I fell while jumping on the bed. I suffered a compound fracture of my arm, and then I got a staph infection. My parents said my initial screams of pain were appropriately horrifying, but as soon as I got to the hospital, it was like a switch had been flipped in my tiny, adorable little brain. And even at that young age, I wanted to make the doctors and the nurses and my parents and everyone around me smile. So fast forward to my school years, which of course involved all the usual indignities, but they also involved me finding love and acceptance on the stage. Musical theater allowed me to tap into my truest self, embodying all kinds of characters, from just a housewife in Working to Adelaide in Guys and Dolls, my favorite role ever. I set off to college at the University of Georgia thinking that bigger stages were in store for me. And then I went to biology class. It's noteworthy, not only because I rarely attended the 8 a.m. 300 student lecture, but it's also noteworthy because the topic of the day was cancer and carcinogens, and the professor put up on a slide in front of the lecture hall a photo of a malignant skin tumor. And wouldn't you know, it looked like something that had been residing on my leg for years. It bugged me all day, enough that I called my dermatologist back home and made an appointment. She said it was probably nothing. That's what doctors say. But 3 weeks later, I found myself back in her office, hearing the words that no one ever wants to hear. You have cancer. So let me get this out of the way. I was diagnosed with malignant melanoma. I caught it early, so I was able to be surgically treated, no chemo or radiation required. I have unfortunately had a number of recurrences, and I also had a cervical cancer diagnosis about 7 years after that. But thanks to the eagle eye that I developed after the first go-round, I have been cancer-free for many years. And by the way, I did eventually go back to campus and seek out that biology professor, and I told her she saved my life. For a lot of 19-year-olds, a cancer diagnosis would have sent them inside themselves. But for me, it was an inflection point in a different way. I could retreat, I could shrink down, I could disappear into my pain and sadness and fear, or I could talk about it. So that's what I did. I talked about my experience, thinking that even if I convinced one person to wear sunscreen or stay out of the tanning bed or schedule a skin check, that would be worth it. I treated every interaction as if I was going back up on a stage. And just like that, I was an advocate. And advocacy has played a tremendous role in my life since then. I started volunteering for the American Cancer Society, starting a Relay for Life chapter at UGA to raise money for treatment, support, and one day, a cure. I joined the Phi Kappa Literary Society, a debate organization founded in 1820 at UGA, dedicated to excellence in public speaking, academics, and critical thinking. And that led to my decision to continue my education at the University of Tennessee College of Law. But law school was even more of an education than I bargained for. So I learned a lot about the kind of advocate that I wanted to be. But unfortunately, I also learned that young women in the Deep South in particular aren't always welcome on those kinds of stages. So while I was advocating for students by serving as the VP of the Graduate Student Senate, while I was working as a student judicial advisor, and while I was lobbying the legislature to disallow smoking in the dormitories, I realized that I wanted a career in public service. I earned a presidential management fellowship, packed my bags, and moved to the great big stage that is our nation's capital. But of course, at this time, there was also a guy, because you knew we had to get back to those stumbles that I referenced earlier. When I moved to DC, I was seeing someone that I had been in love with since my teen years. We had been doing the long distance thing, mostly successfully, and were excited to be living in the same city. But unfortunately, living in the same city caused us to learn things about each other that we probably should have learned earlier, and everything spectacularly fell apart. And also, unfortunately, everyone I knew in DC at the time was either his friend or one of my work colleagues. I was in a new place, I was in a new exciting phase of my life, and I just felt like I had nobody to share that with. I was busy with work and bar exam prep, so I didn't have time to commit to activities where I might have expanded my social circle. So I figured I could go online. It's the modern age after all, but I definitely didn't want to date. So I didn't want to shell out any of my limited government salary on, dating websites Match, eHarmony. So what do when it's 2005? You go to Craigslist. You go to Craigslist and you start looking around. I'm not going to tell you all the details today, even though it's a really, really good story. I have to leave you wanting just a little bit more. But most people find couches and jobs on Craigslist, and I found my husband. Yet another example of my very special talent for turning heartbreak into something new and joyful and unexpected. A few others, I failed the bar exam, which seemed like the absolute end of the world. But then I worked with a tutor, I tried new study strategies, and not only did I pass on my second attempt, but those strategies stayed with me and helped me pass my certified sommelier exam on the first try years later. I didn't get the one promotion that I most desired in my career, which seemed like the end of the world. But then I got opportunities that were even better, that took me to new professional heights and exposed me to things and opened doors that I never would have imagined. And most recently, my husband got the job of his dreams, which doesn't sound like a failure, but it meant that we would have to sell our beloved DC house, leave our chosen family behind, and start completely over on the opposite coast. And that seemed like the end of the world. But then I got here, put myself out there, found communities like the Golden Gate Breakfast Club, and now I love our life here in the Bay. So from a young age, I learned to smile through pain, find strength in adversity. Whether it was discovering my voice on a theater stage, navigating personal and professional setbacks, facing the fear of a cancer diagnosis, all of those moments taught me resilience and the importance of being myself and staying true to that. Advocacy and public service have given me a purpose, and it was a way to transform my personal struggles into a force for good. And I've learned to tell my story in a way that resonates and inspires. And every time I now step onto a stage, whether it's at a fundraiser, in front of a legislative body, whatever the specifics, I'm fueled by the desire to make a difference, to try to be a voice for someone or someones who are not yet ready to speak for themselves. So all of those stumbles, all of those unexpected turns led to growth, led to opportunity, and helped me further refine my message and my mission. So if there's one thing for you to take from my journey, is no matter how unpredictable it might be, do what you can to embrace it. Life isn't about having all the luck to spare. It's about making the most of that hand that you're dealt and trying to find joy in the journey. So I appreciate your time, your attention, your friendship, all of the things that you share with us on Wednesdays. And I really look forward to being back in front of you in November to talk about my other favorite way to deal with adversity, wine.
I'll be looking forward to that November presentation as well. For our third speaker this morning, we have Gordon Hill. Gordon was born on January 1st, 1938, and his life has been more serendipitous than planned. Over his 45-year professional career, Gordon was known as a computer geek in a suit, and he spent 16 years as a professional speaker. His greatest success, however, was his 63-year marriage to Frances, his high school sweetheart. When she passed away in 2020, Gordon embarked on a new journey, enrolling in grad school and earning an MA in English in May 2023. Today, he is embracing his passion for writing, focusing on living as an original. Ladies and gentlemen, please do welcome to our virtual stage, Gordon Hill.
Thank you, Carl. And Patricia, I thought I'd dress up today. If you belong to the National Speakers Association from 1987 to 2000, you probably saw me. I attended every national convention, and this was my look. But like many of the thousands who belong to NSA, you may not have known me. I never presented a main platform program or a breakout session, but I was a walking sponge. I learned so much. Why is an 86-year-old retired geek in a suit giving a new kid's speech at the Golden Gate Breakfast Club? It's a happy accident. If I wrote an autobiography, I would title it "Embrace Your Happy Accidents." Yes, I was born on January the 1st, 1938, 12:41 a.m. I checked in at 8 pounds, 11 ounces, which means I was probably a full-term baby. If you believe life begins at birth, that's when mine began. If you believe life begins at conception, roll the calendar back 9 months and you'll come to April Fool's Day, 1937, which may seem more appropriate than New Year's Day, because I have the feeling whoever constructed my DNA sat there and said, we need to create a guy who's pretty smart, but we also need to create a guy who, when he makes plans, they don't work out. And when they tank, we can say, there you go, Gordon, you thought you could do that. Surprise, April Fool's. Now, before I continue, it's important you know I'm an autodidact and have an engineering mindset, which means I'm a self-taught learner. I like to dig things out for myself. and I model everything. I just create models and analyze them all the time. I didn't know I was an autodidact until about 10 years ago, but the early evidence about the age of 2, my first sentence to my mother when she was trying to help me with something was, "No, me do it me own self." I've always been somewhat obsessed with doing things myself. My first happy accident occurred in 1951 in the 8th grade. Because I'd just gone through puberty. I'd grown 7 inches in 1 year. My feet had gone from a size 8 to a size 14. And I sat next to the most wonderful girl in the world in class. Her name was Carolyn Glover, and I was in love, but I didn't want to tell her because if I told her and she rejected me, I knew I would die. I finally got up the courage to tell her. She agreed to go to the homecoming dance with me. We went to the dance. She took her little Kodak camera, took pictures of all of her friends in their little new dresses for dances. And when I walked her home, we stopped under a street light. I kissed her. I'd never kissed a girl before. I think my brain had a nuclear meltdown because I dropped her camera, which broke into a million pieces, destroying all the pictures from her first dance. So she went running home, crying. The next day at school, she told every girl there what had happened. So I was persona non dateable forever. Except in my junior year in high school, there was a new girl in school, Frances Chestnut. She was only 5 feet tall. I was 6'4". I was the tallest guy in the class. She was the shortest girl. And my buddies who liked to play pranks on each other goaded me into dating her, which I did. I asked her to the homecoming dance, the same dance that had destroyed my life 3 years before. On Monday of the dance, the band canceled. In 1954, if the band canceled, you had to cancel the dance. But our school principal did a lateral arabesque and hired the little dance band I played in to play at the dance, which meant that taking Frances to the dance, I would set her over in the chairs along the wall with the girls who didn't have dates, and I would play in the band. And at the end of it, I thought, man, my life is dead again. We went for a hamburger and fries at the local student hangout, King's, and I had to ask her if she'd had a good time because my mother had instructed me thusly, thinking I should be a gentleman. I asked her if she had a good time, and she said, I may have had the best time of my life. Well, now I couldn't figure that out because I'd taken her to the dance. I'd only danced with her 2 or 3 times. She had been abandoned. But then she told me that night, the chaperones at the dance were the 2 coaches, 2 good-looking single guys all the girls had crushes on. And she was the new kid in school who was shy and didn't have a lot of friends. But when the coaches danced with her, all the other girls at the dance wanted to become her friend. They wanted to know what it was like to dance with the coaches. So we had a second date and another date, another date. And we got married when we were 19. And 19 was another happy accident for me because in my junior year in high school, I decided I wanted to be a high school math and science teacher. So I graduated from high school early so I could start college right here in Maryville at Northwest Missouri State, except it did not go well. I failed chemistry my first term. I retook it in the summer, passed it, but I failed educational psychology, which is a requirement for being a teacher. So I threw up my hands at 18, joined the Air Force for 4 years and went off. Well, they tested me and my math and science scores were off the charts, as you might imagine. So they sent me to a tech school to learn how to be an electronics technician. After 12 weeks in the tech school, I missed Frances so much that I went home on my school break leave. We got married. She stayed at home to finish her business college school, and I went back to finish my tech school. They told us whoever graduated top in their class would get their choice of duty. So I studied hard, graduated top of my class, and put in for a duty assignment in Omaha, Nebraska, which is about 100 miles from here. Except when my orders came down, they assigned me as a technical instructor. I was a professional speaker. Now, you may not think a 19-year-old technical instructor in 1957 is a professional speaker, but as a technical instructor, I spoke 6 hours a day, 5 days a week in 3-week phases for 2 years. So I got more professional speaking experience from 19 to 21 than a lot of professionals get in years. So I got out of the Air Force, went to college, got an engineering degree, went to work for General Motors as an engineer. They tried to promote me to engineering manager. I didn't want to be a manager. They refused to let me continue working as an engineer. So I quit and got into sales. For 10 years, I was a geek in a suit who was selling scientific computers and high-tech stuff. And the reason I was successful is because I knew more about my products than competing salesmen. I didn't have to call in professional help to get the business. Then another happy accident. In 1976, at the age of 39, my boss assigned me to a job neither one of us thought I could do, which was to be the technical guru between our high-tech salesmen and our engineers and manufacturing. And my job was to create specifications and proposals for custom modem products, which we did for companies like L.M. Ericsson in Sweden and Nippon Electric in Japan and IBM here in the United States. Then, in 1986, another happy accident. The company I was with fell on hard times. I was laid off and became a consultant. One of my first consulting jobs was back at the company that had laid me off to develop a universal 9600 bit per second modem spec. And while I was there, one of my old buddies, Tommy Straub, said, "Hey, have you ever thought about teaching seminars?" No, I had not. So I contacted some seminar companies, formed a subchapter S corporation, and became a contract seminar leader to teach voice and data communications technology. While I was doing that, Tony Alessandra came to St. Petersburg, Florida to speak. I went down to hear Tony, what he had to say. After the program, I went up to see Tony. I said, "Hi, I'm Gordon Hill. I'm a high-tech seminar leader, and I'd like to know a little bit more about becoming a better professional speaker." And he said, "Do you know about the National Speakers Association?" I said, "No, I don't." So he told me about it. I called them. They told me there was a chapter in Tampa just across the bay. I attended their next meeting. Sam Edwards was the featured speaker. I joined the Florida Suncoast chapter, which is now the Central Florida chapter, on the spot. And after I gave them my check, they said, "You can't be a chapter member unless you're a member of National." So I called National. I joined National in 1987, I think it was. I attended my first NSA National Convention. It was the one where Lane Longfellow gave his first program, Integrity Breeds Income. And for the next 13 national conventions, I attended. In 2001, I retired. I was 63. I was tired of getting on airplanes 80 to 100 times a year. And my wife and I decided we were going to become retirees. When she retired, we moved to New Mexico. Then in 2016, I sent an email to Patricia Fripp. And I said, "I'm kind of at loose ends. What should I do?" Her response was, "Share your wisdom." And that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. So my closing comment is, be yourself. Everyone else is taken, and do what you're good at. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much to our 3 speakers, and let's give them a nice big round of applause. Very good. And thank all three of you for sharing your life and experiences with us. Very, very much appreciate it. But now it's time to move on to, of course, and your question is one of the most important parts of the meeting. So we open it up for questions to everybody out there. You can, there you go, Kathy
Yeah,
Somerville, go
I
ahead.
just want to say what an honor it was. And thank goodness I went first so that I could listen to Gordon and Betty. What an honor it was to see that. And Gordon, your last line, you ended on such a high pitch. What did Fripp say? Share your wisdom. And I just love that. So it was an honor to be a part of this panel. Grateful for the revelation. And it just reminds me why this matters so much, why the human connection. It's always been a long time ago. I think, Antonio, wasn't it the happiest people in the world meeting for breakfast? I mean, we were just there to share the good stuff with one another, and the legacy continues. Thank you so much. Thank you.
May I jump in and say something to Betty? Betty, I know your story. In 1995, I was diagnosed with stage 3 Hodgkin's, and I went through 14 chemos. I had chemo 1 week and went out and taught a seminar the next week for 7 months. About 15 years ago, I had cancer on my nose. I had Mohs surgery on my nose. 2 weeks ago today, I was in the doctor's office 5.5 hours because my nose cancer had returned, and they had to do 2 cuttings. So I don't know if you can see it. I get the stitches out Friday, but I know your story and I love you beyond words.
Oh, right back at you.
All right. And by the way, that bandage that you have there, Gordon, that really blends in nicely. Well done there. I didn't see it until you pointed it out. Well done. Okay. Any questions?
I have one.
Yes, go right ahead.
So it's not really a question, it's a comment to both Betty and Gordon. Betty, and to everyone, when I went back to school after I stopped recruiting and before I became a speaker and I was searching for what to do next, I encountered a young girl who got, I believe the cancer is called Ewing's sarcoma. This girl was a state swimming champion, and the week after high school graduation, noticed a painful mass on her leg. Long story short, she survived the first round. It came back. Sadly, she did not survive, but there's a wonderful, recently released YouTube video about her. And if you're interested, Betty, I'll send that to you, called The Not Dying Girl. She started a blog the first time around called The Not Dying Girl. And it was just, and she was in 2 of my classes. That's why I'm bringing it up. She and I became friends. She was, 19 and I was, doesn't matter how old. And anyway, so I got to know her personally. But I wanted to share that with you, Betty. And her strength and resilience, even in the face of death, was really powerful. She accomplished everything on her bucket list. And I won't tell you the whole story because it's in the beautiful video. Gordon, when after I was a computer programmer and then a dancer, which you learned at my New Kids on the Block, then I went to work for Computer Sciences Corporation as a software consultant, helping clients develop software on our platform, as well as transferring data through a modem and a coupler. So I had to learn a lot about that technology. And my client was Hapag Lloyd, the huge German shipping vendor. And whenever their data didn't transfer overnight, I got screaming calls. So I have a lot of fond and not fond memories of my days working with modems. Thank you, Carl.
Okay, great. Yeah, we all remember that sound of the modem handshake, right? Yeah. Oy. And I was in information technology, so I was hearing that thing all the time going off. Yes, I was a computer nerd in a suit, Gordon, so couldn't help it. All right. Anybody else have a question they would like to bring up?
Carl, you're doing a great job. Thank you very much. I just want to say I love the New Kids Talks. Absolutely love them. You get to know people on a different level. So congratulations to you all. And I would like to ask Kathy what's happening with her 3 sons.
You're so sweet. So there's 2 sons and a daughter. And as much as I bragged about the boys all while growing up, because they were playing football and doing all that, my daughter and I, it is, she's taken over the lead. She's the one that's made me a grandmother. She is the one that I can see the mini me in. It is funny what everybody says, how, your sons go on, but your daughters remain. And she's the lamplight of my heart these days. And I am a grandmother to a granddaughter. She wanted a boy because she thought it would be easier. And I was wishing for my granddaughter, and I got her, and she is a light bulb. So yeah, so thanks for asking, Fripp. And life continues. And I love that, Gordon. Happy accidents. Praise God. I would say the things I didn't plan in life are the things that bring me the most joy. So I am grateful beyond measure for all of that. So thank you.
All right. Anybody else?
Janelle has her hand up.
I don't see it. Okay. Yes.
My
Yes. Go
electronic
right ahead.
hand. Yeah, my electronic hand is not working.
Okay.
I don't know. I was thinking 3 kids in the block, even though I did one the last time. I didn't know, did I want to get up early and come see? I'm so glad I did. I realize what this does is it, because we've had our lives all before we met each other, and then we are older, and the knowledge that we have about our previous lives actually helps us. It just helps so much as we get older. And I want to say something, Gordon, about, I assume that's a squamish cancer that you have in your nose. Is that right? Yeah, he's nodding his head. So yeah.
It's basal. It's a basal cell, very deep, and I'm going to untie my tie.
Yeah, and the real key is to catch those before they go deep, because otherwise they do that surgery, and they really have to dig deep. Now, I moved to Albuquerque about 6 years ago, and I can't believe that much time has gone by. And about 2 years when I was there, I developed one on my nose. And the first doctors told me it's nothing. Boy, I think that we should all read that as it's something. Just accept it. It's something. And so when I got there, it wasn't very deep. They just had to go one level low. But it's, I mean, I see it every time I look at my nose. I don't think anybody else notices it, but it's there. And the thing that I've learned from that is that when you live in high altitudes, such as, I think Albuquerque must be one of the highest big cities in the United States. It must be. We're a whole mile ahead of on top of Denver, and Denver's the mile high city, so it's really high. And when that sun beats down on you, it's like it penetrates so deeply inside you, and you don't have to be out in it very long at all before you become at risk for a squamish cancer. There's so many dermatologists here in Albuquerque. I didn't realize that. And of course, the older you get, I think probably we're more susceptible to these. I would just encourage everybody, just slather your face, especially your face, your nose, because it sticks out. Slather your face with sunscreen, because it can kill you if it's not, or else they have to start removing parts of your face. And that's pretty awful. So it's such a great lesson to hear that. And I'm so glad, Gordon, that you're surviving with it. And you're right, it will probably come back. I see a dermatologist every 6 months now, just to have them look at it, and they really examine that, because they know what can happen. That cancer, I think, stays inside you. It must, and then it just comes back again. But when I tell doctors that I've had cancer, they want, oh, what kind of cancer? I say, squamish. Oh, that's nothing. that nothing can kill you.
Yeah, there's no such thing as nothing, right? That's
Yeah.
that doesn't exist. And you're right about the experience. You know, with just the people we have in the room right now, we have more than 1,000 years of experience. Think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Bert, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just if we're finished with the meeting, I'm sponsoring a house party for Aaron Peskin, who is the president of the Board of Supervisors of San Francisco. He's running for mayor. And if you're a city resident, I'd like you to tell me if you want to come to my house and hear him and maybe have some refreshments. It will be on Saturday, August 10th from 5 to 7 p.m. And I have no idea how many people are going to show up, but I certainly hope everybody here who's in San Francisco will. I put in the chat box my address and phone number. Please contact me and let me know if you plan to come. If you don't know Aaron Peskin, he is a man who has an endless memory and will tell you he has actually been in office in San Francisco for about 40 years and knows everything. So it would be a really nice thing if you came here. Again, 5 to 7 p.m. August 10th is coming Saturday at my house.
Very good. Thank you, Bert.
Yeah.
Carl, a point of order. Yes. Did we do our approval thumbs up here officially for our new kids?
Well, we haven't yet. I'm waiting for some probing questions that will dig in and find the scandal in their pasts. But so far, it hasn't happened. Anybody else have a question before we do that? Yes, Patricia.
Can you hear me? Am I on?
Yes, you're
okay. Good. Having never used the phone for Zoom before, I can quite understand why people have problems with it. Well, one, I would like to ask each of our new kids if there were one scandal in your life that might disqualify you, what would it be in 1 or 2 sentences? Knowing that we're a very open-minded bunch.
If I had one scandal that would disqualify me, I promise you I would make it a docu-series on Hulu. So I don't. Other than the occasional mistakes that rerouted my desires, I think that I am pretty boring on the outside.
All right. Okay.
I think other than finding my husband on Craigslist, which I guess isn't really a scandal because it'll be 15 years married in September. I do recall that when I turned 21 and I was living in Atlanta, I celebrated my first drinks ever, of course, by getting slapped on the rear end by 2 then members of the Atlanta Braves baseball team, Mark Lemke and Jeff Blauser. That was pretty scandalous.
I think the statute of limitations has passed. When I was in high school, the 4 guys I ran with, we all thought we were Arthurian knights in the modern day. And we built a castle in the woods. One of the local townspeople allowed us to build a shack on his land in the wooded area. And we built the shack with building materials contributed by local vendors, although they did not know they were contributing it. We used that shack as a weekend escape to play out our King Arthur, our Arthurian knight fantasies.
All right. Okay. Well, not too scandalous, really, when you think about it. But just before we do the vote, let's have one more round of applause, and then I'll turn the recording off. There we go.
Hey. Yeah.